All right, welcome. I'm sure we've got some more people, it looks like, who are logging on, so I might give it a few seconds more. Hope everybody's having a great afternoon. I recognize some of the little squares and out there, and I'm happy to see people I feel like I know. Great. Well, it is really my honor today to introduce Dr. Edward Hubbard. He's the president and CEO of Hubbard & Hubbard. He's been in business for a very long time, and he is one of the most prolific people I know. Let's see, more than 59 DEI books, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, and in addition to articles, and he does a lot of speaking, but he's really considered a guru in this space. You know, being able to measure, understand the ROI of both ERGs and diversity in general. He's been a speaker for us in the past, and people have been like glued to his topics and take lots of notes and learn a lot. And for those of you who were in our keynote this morning and asking questions about, you know, how do you get to that scorecard place, Ed is really an expert. In fact, we are so honored to have him. He was nominated or won an award as the Living Legends of Diversity. So that's pretty impressive. We're just really happy to have you here. And his complete bio is available for you. I would definitely say take a look at it. And I want to give you as much time as you can, Ed. So I just want to thank you for being here. And I want to let everybody know you're going to very much look forward to the session. Also, just as a reminder, we are spotlighting Ed. So if you want to see him in the deck and not everybody, just hit that view button on the upper right and make sure you hit speaker view versus the gallery view. Ed, thanks again, and I will turn the stage over to you.
Okay, thank you, Teresa, and thank you again for the opportunity to present to the audience. And the audience, welcome to the session. The conferences that your host has put together for you is always great, and so I hope that we can add some value as part of that. We're going to be focusing on measuring the impact and being able to look at measuring impact and looking at analytics in your ERGs. And so I'm going to just make sure that everybody can see the screen move. And so I'm shifting over to the objectives. And so if you can see the screen move, you can put it in the chat box and they can let me know whether or not everybody's able to see it. And I want to make sure the technology is working. And so as we go through this process to get us kick-started here, and thank you for responding, we're starting out with our objectives, and that is that we're going to be focused on introducing you, first of all, to DEI strategy and looking at the notion of strategic alignment. We're also going to spend some time building diversity ROI processes and measurements, differentiating between activity-based measures and results-based outcomes, for an example. In addition to that, we are also going to help you go through and build your initiatives and talk about how you design those initiatives with the metrics and the analytics in mind. And then also, we'll get a chance to, as part of this process, help you to apply this directly to a process of being able to look at the things that you've learned today and how to apply it directly to an application of your own choosing. And then in addition to that, talk about building some diversity ROI skills for the future. And so this is our kind of our agenda as we go through this process. So the first thing we're going to introduce you to is DEI strategic performance alignment. So that's diversity, equity, and inclusion alignment performance. So let's talk about that. And let's start with a set of definitions. One of the definitions that we can start with is one that comes from my mentor, Dr. Roosevelt Thomas. And he defines diversity as a collective mixture characterized by differences and similarities that are applied in pursuit of an organization's objectives. So it's how we're both different and how we're similar, and how we take those differences and similarities and apply them in pursuit of the organization's objectives, like being able to improve the culture, for an example. I've added to that in looking at this from a strategic diversity ROI management standpoint, because it's not mixtures just for mixture's sake. It's really about the process of planning for, organizing, directing, and supporting those mixtures in a way that make a measurable difference in the organization's bottom line performance. And so when I talk about mixtures, what am I really speaking about? Well, we're talking about things like workforce diversity, that's group and situational identities. So when we think about the collective mixtures, we think about race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, physical ability, and so forth. We also have what we call behavioral diversity, and that is people have differences in work styles, thinking styles, learning styles, and different kinds of forms of communication, as an example. We also have a mixture that's called structural diversity, and that's cross-functional teams, alliances across levels. When you have an acquisition or a merger, guess what? That's a structural diversity issue. And so as an ERG and BRG, you have an opportunity to influence the kinds of things that happens during those mergers and acquisitions with the kinds of initiatives that you have. In addition to that, we have what's called business diversity, and that's where we look at diverse customer markets, supplier diversity, looking at building better community relationships, customer relationships. This is where also innovation comes into play, where you're helping the organization to have better cycle time delivery to its customers, as an example. So what do we mean by being able to take what we do as ERGs and BRGs and really make it meaningful to the organization to have a bottom line? Well, we start out with thinking about the talent that's involved in our ERGs and BRGs, and it's not just about representation. A lot of times you hear people focus on, from a measurement standpoint, just looking at representation as the primary metric. But it really is about representation, because you do need that. But you also have to have, as the major piece that gives you the ROI value, is utilization. Because you can have people who have all kinds of diversity, but if it's not utilized, you don't get the value of exactly what that mixture can bring to the organization. And if you share those kinds of things that you have as ideas and approaches from that collective mixture, it helps to enhance the organization's capability, which also, if it's applied in pursuit of the organization's objectives, then it improves the outcomes for the organization, the culture of the organization, the customers of the organization, which in turn drives enhanced business results and impact. And that's the kinds of things we're going to be talking about, is how do you connect with the impact that you're producing as an ERG and BRG and translate that into a financial value. Well, in some of the work that we've been doing this work for close to 40 years. And so in that 40-year period, we've had a number of different work that we've done with ERGs and BRGs, and they've had some tremendous successes with applying the ROI methodology that we are going to teach you a little bit about. You're going to get a 30,000 foot view of the methodology. But in Prudential, for an example, the ERGs and BRGs help to create a savings of $840,000, and that's by replicating the best practices that they took from their initiatives and then spreaded it throughout the organization. And over a 3-year period, saved the company $31.2 million. And that's a big impact, of course, on the bottom line. And another example of this particular process, in this case study, we're going to do a deeper dive in as we go through our training today. It's a pharmaceutical organization. Their ERGs, they were called culture clubs. And that essentially the culture clubs, we created a ride-along initiative impacting the sell-through to the Chinese market, because the sales and marketing department came to them with a challenge. And as a result, we created work together to create an initiative that allowed the organization to add over $1 billion annually to the bottom line. And I'll show you exactly what kinds of things they did to be able to generate that kind of outcome. As you can see, worldwide, there's a number of different kinds of impacts that these ERGs and BRGs have had, and the kind of case studies that we have chronicled during that time. So you can do some tremendous work when it comes to making a measurable difference in the organization's bottom line performance with your ERG and BRG initiatives. So where do we start? The first place we start is developing a line of sight directly to the strategic business objectives if you're a for-profit organization, or if you're a not-for-profit organization, educational institution, or military organization, or government organization. You're going to be focused on the mission objectives for the organization. So if you don't already have a copy of the strategic business objectives of the organization or the mission objectives, that's the first place you want to start. You want your ERGs and BRGs to have a copy of those objectives, because what you're going to be doing is formulating a value proposition. And that is to say, here's what we're going to deliver to the organization that is of measurable value to the bottom line. And how you're going to translate that is through something called a diversity high impact map. And the high impact map informs what goes on your scorecard and what goes into your dashboards. And then that should inform what you should do as an ERG and BRG strategic plan. Because it's not putting the plan first, it's about being able to look at the organization's strategic business objectives first, have a line of sight alignment with those objectives, and then being able to craft your strategic business plan for your ERG or BRG to be able to look at what you're going to work on. And then you'll think about also, how can we integrate that into the way the company currently does business? And that is to look at its functional plans and integrate them into the functional plans. And at least twice a year, we need to make sure that you take some time out and to measure exactly how well you're doing. So in other words, gauge your progress towards the goals and the objectives that you've set. So as part of this process, you then would create your own ERG and BRG scorecard. Now, in my book, the Diversity Scorecard, I've listed 6 perspectives here. You would focus on the perspectives that are most important for you, but this gives you kind of a way to look at it and to notice that in each one of the perspectives, there is a high impact map, and I'm going to show you more detail on the high impact map in just a minute. But you start out with, what are the objectives in the customer and community relations partnerships perspective, for an example? What are the measures you're going to be using? What are the targets you want to hit? And then how does it connect to those measures, those initiatives that you're putting in place? Your vision and strategy of the organization is the centerpiece of all of this. And so it affects how indeed you're going to create outcomes for the workplace culture and climate, being able to help with leadership development, be able to help with your workforce profile, and so forth. So these are different ways in which you can begin to think about your initiatives. And so when you are focused on the initiatives, this high impact map, which you see on the screen at this point, helps you to translate that. So you start out with listing what the organization's objectives are. Then you think about, what are our ERG and BRG objectives that we've listed based upon the needs of the organization? And then what are the metrics that we need to support those objectives? And then specifically, what are the initiatives that are going to be driven by those metrics that help to support the objectives, that gives a value-added impact to the bottom line of the organization, and it links it back to the organization's objectives that you started with. So it's a process of being able to connect this across the board. So let's take this out of the abstract and make it more tangible. Most organizations will have a set of objectives that says, we want to attract and retain the best talent. And I would imagine that many of you in the audience, find that your organizations have a similar kind of objective. And so from an ERG and BRG objective standpoint, you want to help the organization. You might have a focus to say, we want to help you attract and retain a diverse mixture to get the best. Because a good idea doesn't have a race, gender, color, creed, sexual orientation, or physical ability. It's just a good idea. and you need a diverse mixture to get the best. And so you'll need metrics to support the two dimensions that you have, because you can see, as the objective is written, we have attraction and we have a retention. So how you write the objectives are very important. And so when you are able to think about your metrics to support it, you want to have a set of attraction metrics, and you want to have also a set of retention metrics. And so in this particular case, here's an example. Our attraction metric might be new hires by demographic group. So you might look at the number and percentage of new hires by demographic group. On the retention side, to retain the diverse mixture, we might track things like turnover by group and by level. And so therefore, that would be our particular metric that we'll use to be able to track our retention status, as an example. And so then we may look at, well, what are the particular initiatives that we're going to have to be able to support these particular objectives that we have in being able to enhance the metrics that we have. Well, one might be that you might set up a team recruiting process. You may team up with the talent organization and tell them that you'd like to be involved in being able to go out and recruit people to come into your organization. And you want to be able to have a diverse mixture of people from your various ERGs and BRGs to be a part of that process. And one of the ways that you might help them also in not only just helping them to source for talent, but in addition to that, you may set up a peer coaching initiative for the first 90 days. And that means that each of the ERGs and BRGs would serve as peer coaches to new employees coming on board. And for the first 90 days, you help them to navigate the organization, be able to know how they can network and get to know other people in the organization. If it's a focus around accessibility, being able to look at what kind of accessibility tools are available in the organization, what kinds of things that are important for that person to know to be able to navigate the culture and the climate of the organization well. Because the value add of all of those kinds of things that you would do in your initiatives would be to reflect the customer base that you serve, also reduce the turnover costs. And the reason why turnover cost is so important, because it's going to cost you 1.5 times the salary of the person that you lose to replace them. So if someone makes 50 grand a year, then it's going to cost you 75 grand to replace them. If you lose 12 people, that's a $900,000 hit to your bottom line. So almost $1 million hit for every 12 people. So if you can show the organization how they can retain people, you're helping them to save towards that $1 million. And being able to help shore up, the cost structure in the organization through your ERG and BRG initiative. And also with being able to have the peer coaching initiative, you are going to help the organization improve its employment brand image. And so you're showing that word gets around pretty quickly informally, that essentially the BRGs and BRGs are helping to support onboarding in the process, and they help you to navigate it through the organization, know exactly how you can get plugged in and become a viable part of the organization's culture. And so this is how important your work is that you're doing to be able to show the connections, but you now have a line of sight directly from the organization's objectives directly to the value add that you're going to create. So we're moving from the organization's objectives directly through the metrics, being able to tie those metrics to the initiatives that you put in place, and ultimately to have an impact on the bottom line of the organization. So when we're using these kind of metrics, these are just a sample of different types of measures and analytics that you can utilize to be able to focus on these kinds of things. You might have, from a workforce standpoint, looking at talent pipeline enhancement, as we've talked about, being able to work in your ERGs and BRGs to create promotion-ready members of your ERGs and BRGs. So that you have a whole series of things that you're doing, so you can look at the number of and percentage of people after you've done an assessment of your entire group, to find out how many are promotion ready. And then also to realize that as part of the work that you're doing, you have a profile of what promotion ready means. And so you're working towards that model. Or you might be working on an initiative where you're looking at intern conversions to full-time. You might have internships that the organization provides, and what you're doing is setting up a ERG and BRG initiative to help make those conversions happen. And so people sign up to become full-time employees in the organization. So there's a whole range of things that you can do. We can see in the workplace side, you might focus on employee retention. For an example, on the marketplace side, you might help the organization develop new products for the target market segments that they're focused on. You may have come up with new innovations that helps to generate $25,000 or more due to one of the initiatives that you put forward. Or you're looking at intellectual assets, as an example, in your women's ERG and BRG, that essentially in women and minorities groups, you're really focused on how can we generate the number of patents of new products and services that the organization uses to help enhance its bottom line. So there's a lot of different things you can do. And you can see here that you have to display your results in a way that's compelling. So you have to have things like dashboards and scorecards to really be able to help the organization better understand the value add that you've created. So for an example, the middle bottom gauge that you see here is that example that I mentioned before, 1.5 times the salary of the person that you lose to replace them. In this case, they had 250 people who left the organization, and that created an $18,750,000 problem of regrettable losses, or what we call human capital depletion and costs for the organization. Now, if you're thinking about non-exempt or hourly, the metric for that, or the standard value, is 0.75 times the annual pay and benefits. So these are different, these kinds of things that I'm giving you are what we call standard values. It's a part of the methodology of ROI, and you're able to identify what these standard values are and quickly be able to calculate exactly what the impact is on the bottom line so that you can translate the work that you're doing from activity to results. And so we're going to talk more about that as we go through. So how do you go through an evaluation process? Because in any set of metrics, there are three kinds of metrics that we really pay attention to. We pay attention to efficiency metrics, effectiveness metrics, and outcome metrics that are really focused on impact. So efficiency metrics are focused on things like counts, numbers, and that kind of thing. Effectiveness measures are the kinds of things that I'm just about to explain in levels 0 through 7 to show you the chain of impact. They're the kind of measures that lead to ROI and lead to how you categorize and show the impact of intangibles when you have intangible values that you also want to quantify in some way, or to give what we call SOSs. And I'll tell you more about SOSs as we get into this. And so what are these 7 levels that I'm talking about? Well, the first level is level 0, and we call it needs analysis because we look at the fact that you have to conduct a needs analysis to even know what it is that you're going to be working on. And you want to have a bona fide needs analysis that verifies that it is critical to use the organization's resources and your resources in your budget for your ERG and BRG to be able to focus on a specific initiative. And so when we look at level 1, it's reaction, satisfaction, and planned action. So we want to look at are the kinds of things that we're going to do in our initiative, are they useful and relevant? From level 2, we're talking about, did we help to improve the skills and capacity of our members that we're having as part of this initiative, or capacity of the organization? At level 3, we want to find out, did people go actually back and utilize what we've taught them to do? We've had the initiative, we trained everybody, we essentially told them, here's a new way of operating, here's a new approach you can use, and so forth. And now you have to check at level 3 to see, What's the frequency of the use of the skills that we taught? And then we call that application and behavioral transfer. Then at level 4, based upon our needs assessment, we want to know, did we have a business impact? So what are the outcome metrics that we can show that we've actually added value back into the organization? And one of the ways to do that is, of course, to be able to show impact on revenue. And so in addition to that, we can go to level 5, which is return on investment. And that's where we're showing return on investment percentage and benefit to cost ratios. And I'm going to talk more about these as we get into the calculation of ROI. You also at level 6 will need to show, because you'll have these collateral benefits that will occur. You'll have the opportunity to show that we've had improved collaboration and cooperation. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't get lost and just not have a heavy focus just only on the financial numbers, but there's some also collateral benefits from a story of success standpoint. That's what SOS is, being able to show that we've improved collaboration between groups and teams and members and the organization and the community, for an example. So those are just a couple of examples of how you would utilize this process, because in setting up the process and looking at the chain of impact, at level 1, we want to know, did they like what we did in our initiative, and do they plan to use it? So looking at the number and percentage who intend to use, that's a metric that you might have for a level 1. Then in terms of looking at learning, did they learn it? Level 3, did they actually use it? Level 4, did it make a difference? Level 5, was it cost effective? And level 6, did it add value beyond the financial? So as you look at this chain of impact, it really helps you to show and demonstrate, because you perform evaluations at each one of these levels. You show exactly to your stakeholders, people who give you budgets and monies to be able to perform your initiatives and so forth. You've shown them in concrete terms exactly what you've produced for the organization. And in fact, not only did people sign up and come to your session or come to your initiative, they essentially liked it, they plan to use it, and all the way through the point of having a effective, cost-effective return on investment and benefit to the organization, as well as all of the intangible benefits that goes along with that. So I hope this is making sense as we go through. You can see the flow of how you do this, and we're going to go in more detail in terms of how you start. And the reason why we're spending time with the needs analysis piece of this is because needs analysis is very important. Our basic rule is that if there is no need, there is no benefit. So if you don't perform a needs analysis for your ERG and BRG's initiatives, then essentially you can't claim that you had a benefit at the end of the process. You've got to show that there was a gap, and you filled that gap by being able to look at ideally what the organization wanted to accomplish, or what your group wanted to accomplish, or what the organization needed, and then specifically how you close that gap to be able to provide benefit. So it's going to affect and impact your initiative's design. It also will have an impact on your members, the organization, and it also helps to focus on cost, and also it builds credibility in what your ERGs and BRGs are doing, your accuracy, the trust, and sustainability of your initiatives over its life cycle. So these are things that we're going to be focusing on. And what we focus on here in the methodology is we focus on real tangible tools to help you get to exactly how you do this. So you start out with a situation analysis. This is another form of needs analysis. And so you might look at ideal versus actual. And you looked at then what was the gap in ideal versus actual. And then what were some of the causes that created this gap? And then was that cause in terms of its gap type, one based upon people not having the skills, not having the knowledge, or not having the attitudes, or specifically the environment to be able to close the gap? And so what is your solution going to be? How are you going to approach this? What's your initiative going to be to help the organization move forward? Well, let's take it out of theory and put it into practice. And this is based on a real example. Well, the ERGs and BRGs at this organization, they were helping to support the talent management organization. And they did an assessment from a business situation analysis to look at the number of candidates that they had for engineering positions. And the ideal situation would be that candidate slates for engineering positions should be at least 75% diverse slates. And what we mean by diverse slates are that it had at least one woman and one person of color. What they found in actual practice was that they were at 35%, not at 75%. So there's a 40% gap in engineering candidates slates for open positions. So then they did some diagnosis and talk with managers to see, well, why is it that this gap exists? And so they found out that the managers said that, well, we can't find qualified candidates. And they also said, well, we think that the women and the people of color candidates don't have the required skills that we're really looking for. And so therefore, we don't have capable candidates to be able to do this. Well, what was the actual gaps impact in terms of the types of gaps that existed? Well, they didn't have skill, they didn't have knowledge. They had really challenges with their own personal attitudes and saying that they don't think that people would be qualified. And there are also some environmental issues that were part of their discovery as well. Well, the solution was that they took the managers to a Black and Hispanic Engineer of the Year Awards conference with 3,000 Black and Hispanic engineers at that conference. And so they told the managers after taking them to that conference that, okay, you say you can't find people who have the required qualifications. Here are the top of the cream of the crop of engineers and who are getting awards. And essentially they had really an agreement with the president that people could be hired on the spot if they found the right candidate. And so as a result, they were able to fill candidate slots immediately, given that they had this whole room full of people who met the criteria. They also talked to them about being able to set up relationships with the engineering associations and also having a relationship with the underrepresented minority engineering internship program. And they created this URM engineering internship initiative that focused on being able to have that improved conversion of interns to full-time employees. So as you can see, by doing this analysis and being able to have a structured, managed approach to the way in which you create your diversity analytics and also to use analytical sciences, you can begin to apply it so that you are able to help solve the problem. So if we're thinking about this, one of the approaches that we teach is one around what we call SPIN-R. And SPIN-R is, what is the situation? You ask that question. You listen to the issues that people are talking about. So as an ERG and BRG member, when you talk to managers and employees and others, you want to first diagnose the situation. That's starting the needs analysis process. Then you ask the question, what's the problem that is created by that situation? So you describe the problem created by that situation, and then you go into, well, what's the impact and consequences if we don't do anything and that this problem continues? Because there is a consequence and impact of doing nothing. You do have the choice of not doing anything, but it may cost you some things. So you want to be able to calculate what that cost is and talk to the managers and interview them about what those costs are, or talk to the employees if it's an employee-related initiative in terms of what are the costs that they have in terms of low morale, other kinds of things that they're thinking about, poor employment brand image, and so forth. And then what's the need and the resolution to this situation. So list what's needed and can be done to resolve that particular problem. So in one spin-hour example, the situation was that the organization was experiencing low market share. And the problem that it created was low revenue, poor brand image across demographic groups, and poor and unsatisfactory customer service ratings in some of the key ethnic markets that they wanted to go to. Now, what's the impact and consequence of all of this? Well, it puts them in as an organization into a weak competitive position, lost revenue, and poor profitability. And so what they felt their need is to then create a multicultural competency training program, which they could deliver, as well as helping to teach the sales reps how to go out and have enhanced selling skills in the multicultural market. So they were able to help solve that problem by thinking about using the SPIN-R methodology to show exactly how it leads to the conclusion that you're starting with a situation of low market share, resolving it in terms of the kind of solution that you've come out with, and you've talked about the problem and the impact if things continue to be left unhandled. So this is a part of what we call intentional diversity transformation. It's a part of the sciences that go into really analyzing the process. And there's an extended process in creating the particular process of intentional diversity transformation by developing an improved scorecard. So it means that you start out with the SPIN-R technique and essentially look at the process, the activities, and the outputs, because you oftentimes will get inputs, and those inputs help you to create your activities, and they produce outputs. And then what the organization is really interested in is really being able to look at your ERG and BRG initiatives and say, what are the outcomes that you're creating for us? That's great that you have numbers of people who have come to your initiative and that kind of thing, but what does that mean as a value add bottom line impact for the organization? So what is it on the short term, the intermediate, and the long term in terms of outcome? And then what's the strategic impact of the particular initiatives that you've had from an ERG and BRG standpoint? But you'll notice also at the bottom of this sheet, you're going to be listing what are the descriptive analytics that you're going to have, your predictive analytics in terms of forecasted ROI, and also prescriptive analytics. And that is, you're using analytics that help to tell you what you need to do about the situation. So when you are talking about transformational analytics, you're talking about being able to have them descriptive, prescriptive, and predictive as part of the work that you're doing. And we know that we don't have time to go into the details of a lot of this, but at least you have an understanding that there is a process. There is more that you can learn about being able to create these kinds of things and have a structured approach to be able to show demonstrated value add from your ERG and BRG initiatives. Because here's how it translates. One of the tools that we created is something called a strategic linkage and drivers map. And so you can see that by virtue of that situation that we've just described, what you're going to see are lead and lag indicators that you can start to track to see how well your initiative is doing. So as a result of understanding that situation and coming up with a resolution of what you're going to do, you'll start to see that as a result, if people are starting to implement the things that you've talked about in your initiative, you'll see the number of customer contact and customer appointments go up. For an example, you'll start to see more presentations being made. You'll start to see proposals, because these are lead indicators into affecting the bottom line revenue results. And we also see that we can track things like the customer satisfaction ratings, because as a result, we'll start to see more closes in terms of sales. And you're also being able to see that referral business is picking up. And you're getting repeat customers. And what that does is to help to improve your gross profit per sale, which ultimately improves your total gross profits, which helps to increase revenue. And see at the top of this form, you can see that our corporate goal and objective was to increase revenues by a target market segment, and you would have in fact accomplished that. So what it means is to take the time to do a thorough diagnosis of whatever your initiative is. This, you can see, is focused on revenue and outcome, but it could be focused on being able to improve collaboration and cooperation, to see what's the situation that you were dealing with initially, what are the kinds of things that are lead indicators that things are changing, what's the business results that are changing to improve that collaboration and cooperation, and ultimately, what kind of goals have been impacted. You might have reduced conflict. It could be a whole range of things, improve relationships, higher morale scores, engagement scores. There are a whole list of different metrics, analytics that you can use to be able to relate to this. So as we go through this process, you can see that the whole focus of this is to demonstrate tangible evidence-based ROI results that show that ERG and BRG initiatives are a measurable investment, not a cost. Because if indeed you have not produced a value add for the organization, they may view your initiatives as just a cost of doing business. But you want to be able to have them see your particular initiatives really focus on being an investment for the organization, not a cost. And you can do that in a very tangible and very outcome-based way. So how do you do that? How do you calculate diversity return on investment? Well, we're going to get a chance to actually do that right now. And so as we go through this process, let's understand what the analysis model is. First of all, you have to know what you want to know. So you start with begin with the end in mind. So you want to begin to detail what are the things you want to have answered by the end of your initiative. So in your ERG and BRG initiative, what should come as the outcomes that you want to see? So you want to list those out, very deliberately. Then you collect data and analyze it. And then after you collect data and analyze it, you then have to isolate diversity's contribution. Now, this is a process that we teach. There are 10 different methods for isolation. Things like participant estimates, being able to use things like time series analysis, and a number of different techniques. But we've got them rank ordered from higher to lower in the types of techniques you can use. But all of them are able to show that it was your initiative, your ERG and BRG initiative, that made the difference. Because somebody's going to ask you that question. Well, how do we know that your initiative really made the difference in this process? What isolation does is to give credit where credit is due to all of those contributors to the outcome. So if it's the benefits department and they contributed to the outcome because they said, well, the reason why we have better retention is because we have a better benefits plan. Well, guess what? They might be right. And so as a part of that process, you want to give them credit for that. But also your ERG and BRG may have worked very diligently and hard to put an initiative in place, and essentially it helped to improve retention. And so those are things that you want to get credit for as well. So isolating helps to be able to do that. You then convert that contribution to money. You then are able to calculate fully loaded costs and benefits to calculate ROI and benefit to cost ratio and payback period. You report it out to other people. And of course, you track it and measure it over time to see if you continue to have year over year impact with your initiative, because your initiatives will have, certainly a broad life cycle. So in terms of this process, it's about being able to start out with reviewing the organization's business strategy. That's always your anchor that you start with. And then you want to follow that process all the way through tracking and assessing your progress. So in essence, what you're doing is you having a business needs analysis. We always start with business needs analysis. And as part of that process, we have to collect the data based upon that analysis. And then we have to analyze the data that we've collected in the process. And that includes our process for isolation and converting and calculating the cost benefits, and then tracking that progress over time. So there are a lot of different things that you have as stages in this model to be able to apply it back in your process. Now, how do you calculate diversity return on investment? Well, you start with looking at net initiative benefits divided by the cost times 100. And for benefit to cost ratio, it's exactly what it sounds like. You take your benefits, fully loaded benefits, divided by fully loaded costs, and that will give you a ratio. And we're going to show you an example of that. And usually when we have a benefit to cost ratio, we always set it up as that ratio ... to 1, which means that for every dollar you put in, you get X dollars back. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute here. But what it does is it shows you exactly how well and efficient your process is running. So if you had $200,000 in benefit and you took out $50,000 in costs, divided by $50,000 in costs, and that's what we mean by net initiative benefits. You have to take the cost out of your benefit load, and that essentially you're being able to calculate, in this case, a 300% diversity return on investment. In your benefit to cost ratio, you take the fully loaded benefits divided by fully loaded costs, and that gives you a 4-to-1 benefit to cost ratio, which again means that for every dollar I put into this investment, I'm getting $4 back. So where can you take your money and put it in a passbook savings account in a bank today and get a 300% return on your investment? I think today it's like 0.0005 of a passbook savings account. So you can show and do those comparative analysis with your particular initiatives to show that this is a good value for the organization, and certainly you're adding value to the bottom line, not just in terms of financial, but also in terms of the intangibles, the collateral benefits. So the calculation again is very simple. Program benefits divided by cost is your benefit to cost ratio. Net program benefits divided by cost times 100 is what we call return on investment percentage. So we're going to give you a chance to try it. And there's your math problem for today. And so what I'd like for you to do is take a minute or so and to essentially try this problem out. So your problem is you got $750,000 in benefits divided by $425,000 in cost. And then your particular formula for your ROI value is to look at 750,000 minus the 425,000 you have in costs divided by that cost number times 100. So take out your calculators, fingers and toes count, and essentially let's see what you come up with. And if we have a host on the line, if you calculate put your calculations in, put them in the chat box, and I'll ask the host to see what kind of numbers are they seeing in the chat box, if that's possible, if they can just identify a couple of the numbers that come out that people have calculated. And so we'll give you a minute to do that. Okay. And is there a host online that can tell me what kind of numbers that you're seeing in the chat box?
Hey, Ed, this is Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
I can share some of them.
Okay.
So I've got 176.47, 1.7 and 76.
Okay.
All
right.
See. ROI 76.47, BCR 1.7. Another one's 1.7 and 76.6.
All right. Excellent, Teresa. Thank you very much for that, because kudos to all of you, because you showed that you can do it. So as you see, your numbers came out exactly as calculated. And that is that in the benefit to cost ratio, for every dollar you put into your particular investment in this initiative, you're getting $1.76 back. And so that's how that's translated. So for every dollar you're putting in, you're getting your full dollar back plus 76 cents. And so that equals to a 76% return on your investment. So as you can see, with being able to have benefits that you're collecting as you're doing your ERGs and BRG initiatives, and collecting those particular things and translating and converting them to monetary value, and then being able to track all your costs, you'll be able to perform a benefit to cost calculation, and also be able to calculate your ROI percentage. So well done, everyone. Great job. And so as part of this process, go ahead.
And I had a quick process question. We had thought about doing a breakout session, but I don't think we have time. So I don't know how much more you have. We can just maybe open it up to Q&A for the whole group.
Okay.
Yeah. So just from a time check, we've got about 20 minutes left.
Yes. Okay. If I have 20 minutes left, I'm definitely going to be finishing the 20 minutes. And so we'll have
time for the Q&A. So maybe
absolutely.
10 and then 10
yes.
Q&A. Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely have time for the Q&A, and then we'll open it up and people can ask questions. Thanks for that, Teresa. Okay. And so that will give us a chance to chat and be able to answer some of your immediate questions. One of the things that I wanted to highlight here as part of this process is that these are the things that we see as common pitfalls that happen with ERGs and BRGs, and that is that there's oftentimes a lack of strategic business alignment because remember, you're always selling something to the organization about the value of what you do. And so you've got to have a particular organized business case that you're presenting. And in this case, you're using metrics and analytics for ERGs and BRGs to be able to make that that happen. So it's a lack of strategic alignment. So you can use the line of sight process to be able to help you with that. You can use the needs analysis process to help you improve your needs analysis approaches, as well as making sure that you have behaviorally specific actions and accountability metrics tied into your ERG and BRG initiatives. You want to show what people have to do and be accountable for in order to make sure that you're going to have a successful outcome or a successful impact for the organization as well. And so these are things that are really critical for the process. And the way you do that, of course, from a tracking standpoint, is to be able to display and show, ROI-based D&I analytics, dashboard scorecards, and stories of success, because these are the things that are going to be the lifeblood of what you go and present when you are showing the product progress that you're making as an ERG and BRG, being able to present a business case for improved budgets and support, for an example, and being able to use resources in the organization to make that happen. And so here's an example of an actual dashboard. This is a real case. I like to use real cases. This is a real case from a ERG and BRG group. And what they did was they went out into the organization's community, and they said, we want to get board placement seats on different community organizations, because we have high potential talent that are members of our ERGs and BRGs, and we want to get them placed so that they can get a chance to utilize those skills. They're learning a lot of things. They've had a lot of skills to offer to the community, and this is a way that they get a chance to practice their skills. So what they did by each of the particular types of ERGs and BRGs out there, you can see them in the first graph that's in the top left, that you can see those were the types of groups that were involved. And what they started to focus on, this initiative was really heavily focused on retention. And so they looked at the impact of retention by having those board placement seats, because they were able to find new access to talent from those community agencies. They connected them with people that were looking for jobs. And so it was a job person match. And so they looked at the number of talent leads and tracked it to see in the bottom left slide to see exactly how many talent leads were generated. Then they looked at the number of conversions to full-time. So they tracked those particular things. In addition to that, as a result of being inside of those community organizations, they found that there were obvious customers for the organization that could essentially be a part of the organization's products and services and be able to be a viable customer. And then also they tracked the dollar volume that these customers generated based upon looking at the customers that they've added from the community agencies. And at the top right, they looked at the number of new market opportunities that, essentially they were able to impact just by having this whole initiative and being able to say, by giving our talent to these organizations, here's the kind of new market opportunities that were created as a result of being able to perform this initiative. So what it does is, whenever you're presenting your dashboard or your scorecard, it has to tell a story. And so you want to focus on the storytelling in this process to be able to show that from a metrics and analytics standpoint, that essentially you're telling the story of, here's how we took this board placement initiative, here's the kind of results we're getting from it, here's what it meant from a organizational standpoint in terms of talent conversions, here's what it meant from a customer standpoint in terms of improved customer sales and profitability for the organization, and just new opportunities that have opened up as part of that. And what it does is it really demonstrates to the organization how valuable ERGs and BRGs are and how important they are and critical to the bottom line of the organization. You can create that kind of value with metrics and analytics and show and demonstrate your value by utilizing these processes. And so as you think about this, let's look at an actual real case and be able to look at exactly what happened. The dilemma was that the sales department was having a problem getting sell-through to the Chinese market. And this is the case that I told you about a little bit earlier. And so I'm going to just highlight some of the issues. They had, again, using SPIN-R, a low market share, had these particular problems and issues that we saw, and you got introduced to some of this earlier, and that essentially they wanted to create a particular approach to help the organization solve the problem. Well, when they looked at some of the business challenges, that's one of the parts of the model, is to identify diversity objectives linked to the business challenges. They looked at all of the things that they could work on, but they said increasing the Chinese patient market share by 15% is something that we can give some support to. And so as a result, they start to think about, how do we link that to what we need to gather about this marketplace? Well, they needed to look at how they're getting access to the Chinese physicians, specifically the patient's knowledge of the products and services that they were selling, and then the number of actual prescriptions that are being written for that particular problem, product, as an example. And so what we're talking about here is that working with this group, as I mentioned, they were called culture clubs, and they had a Asian culture club, a Japanese culture club, a Russian culture club, and they had a various variety of them. We utilized the Chinese culture club and worked together, and we created this thing called a ride-along initiatives with the sales reps. And so because they figured that one of the reasons why that they're getting problems with sell-through is because they didn't have cultural competency in that marketplace. And so therefore, they wanted to ride along and see what they were actually doing. And so as a result of the ride-along initiative, they were able to collect data based upon what they saw them doing. And then they also looked at the fact that the doctors would say, well, how many of the people in your clinical trials, for an example, for the drug that you're trying to sell me, match my patient profile. And so they wanted to look at the patient impact of this. And they realized that a lot of the leave behind literature that the sales reps were doing in the ride along, they were all in English. They didn't translate it into Mandarin, Cantonese, and the other dialects that matched the doctor's patient profile. So that's exactly what they did. They looked through the doctor's targeted audience that the sales reps were trying to sell to, and essentially looked at their patient profiles, and then looked at the actual language and literacy issues that were there, and created leave behind documents that were in the particular support mode to give them a higher visibility, higher readability in terms of the things that they left behind. As a result of this whole process, here's what the outcomes were. It adds, because they replicated this process to all of the other culture clubs, it adds now currently over $1 billion to the bottom line once it was replicated. And that's something that was reported by the accounting department and the finance department. And so they showed that essentially these ERG and BRG initiatives were adding huge value to the bottom line. It also improved the credibility of the ERGs and BRGs as something beyond nice to have. It also improved the customer satisfaction and trust, and it also served as a best or next practice for other groups. You have all of this kind of opportunity available to you, and using the conduit of metrics and analytics to measure your impact is really the way in which you get to that bottom line. There's a structured process. And here's an example of one of the groups that we trained at Mercedes-Benz Financial Services, who were graduates of the training program, for an example. And I wanted to single them out because they did an excellent job of being able to apply the ROI methodology, so much so that they started to then send things back to the C-suite in terms of ROI and being able to improve customer impact, being able to innovate and so forth, that the president of the company called us and said, whatever you did to train our ERGs and BRGs, I want my senior leaders to go through the same training. And that's exactly what we did. We set up the exact same training of the ROI methodology for the senior leaders and took them through the exact same training. Their sponsors got recognized for the work that they were doing. In addition to that, the individuals got recognized for the work that they were doing, and the whole organization benefited from exactly what was being done. So what I'm saying to you is that the proof is in the application. This team went out and applied these methods. They were able to show a critical difference in their before and after, and what they were doing in delivering to their stakeholders in the organization, and made a measurable difference in the organization's bottom line. So in the training that they get, they learn 10 different skills, and they cover all of the things that we've talked about so far, like data collection, isolation techniques, and so forth, and analyzing data. In addition to that, we also have 10 standards that we focus on, and that is that you always focus on results and outcomes. You have a systemic view, you add value, and also you partner with your stakeholders. In addition to that, you always start with the needs analysis and looking at the need or the opportunity. You want to diagnose what the causes are, also use a ROI-based implementation process and evaluation process, and also make sure that it conforms and is feasible with what the organization can adjust to, and also being able to make it evidence-based and results-based. So these are some of the things that you learn as a process user of being able to use the ROI methodology to focus on it. So you get this kit at the end of the training that has tools, templates, and worksheets, the kinds of things that you've seen as part of this presentation. So what I'm saying to you is that there are a lot of different things that you can do. There's a structured process. It's a science like any other science. And so if you look at marketing, sales, and operations, they have both theory and science. Well, for diversity, equity, and inclusion and ERGs and BRGs, and that area, we had a lot of people doing great work on the theory side, but we didn't have a lot of the sciences. And so 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, I took on that challenge to say, how do we put metrics and analytics to this? And that's what you've seen as part of this particular process. So
Hey,
how do you?
Ed,
Yeah,
sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but we do have some questions. And
Oh yeah, sure.
we stop at 3:15 Eastern. So
Okay,
I'm
sure, no
wondering,
problem. So
are you ready to take that?
I certainly am.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and read. First of all, thank you so much. I think everybody's knows there's a ton here, and we really appreciate everything you shared with us. But let me get to some of the questions.
Oh,
So the
sure,
first
sure.
one is, our ERG, and this is from Shamsha Damani. I'm sure I'm botching your name pronunciation. I'm sorry if I am. But her question is, our ERG leaders are all volunteers and don't have
Yes.
time to do this level of in-depth analysis. Do you have any advice for her? And I think there's probably some other organizations that are in the same boat.
Yes, exactly. Great question that you've asked. And yes, there is some advice. One of the things is that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, Gandhi said, be the change that you want in the world. I always say, model the diversity and inclusion that you talk about. And what I mean by that is that form advisory committees. And that is that you may have members in your ERGs and BRGs or members of the finance department, the marketing department, the sales department, and they have some of those skills. And so what you can do is to create an advisory board to your ERG or BRG and make sure that it's consistent of those particular skill sets that you need to be able to do this kind of analysis. That's one particular approach. Another approach is colleges and universities. Oftentimes, many of the colleges and universities are looking for projects for their students to go through to do data collection, to be able to gather information and be able to perform calculations. You can begin to set up your own particular advisory group and internship group to be able to work with student populations. And usually it's no cost because you're helping the college to give the students a chance to get practical experience and value in what they do. So those are two approaches. There are others, but in the interest of time, we can focus on those two. Those two have worked very well with other ERGs and BRGs, having an advisory committee and also taking advantage of college talent as an example.
Great. And I've got another question here for you. Our ERG leaders are motivated and incentivized by their autonomy and have been resistant to the shift to a business impact focused model driven by metrics.
Yes.
How do we work with them to get them to understand that this would be useful?
Okay, great question. And it leads directly back to the thing that we talked about in the line of sight model. Remember, part of that line of sight model was to be able to have systems integration, and the worksheet that you have available, which a copy of that the initiative worksheet is being sent to you. That essentially you will see that integrating into the systems of the way the organization does business is key to that. One of the reasons why the autonomy is so keen for them is because their bonus plans are oftentimes connected to it. And so what you have to do is to say, let's go and interview some of the key strategic managers that we want to influence and to get them accountable for these processes and find out what is of top of mind and top of a plate for them, and think about how our ERG and BRG initiative can solve that problem. When you're working to help them solve and produce results for the organization, which not only helps to get the work done, but in addition to that, help them to get their bonus plan and essentially be able to impact the organization, they will be highly favorable to, being able to show that you are providing value and also be accountable for the kinds of things that are being done. Because oftentimes they have to be convinced through a proof case, and you've got to be able to go and have their best intention in mind to say, how can we help create a win-win between the managers and our particular ERG or BRG, such that we can come out with a process that they win and we win and the organization wins as part of the process.
Yeah, so we've got somebody who has her hand up. Christina, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Sure. Thank you so much, and good afternoon. I've thoroughly enjoyed this talk and presentation. Thank you so much. My question is, have you used predictive analytics as part of your planning strategy?
Yes, Christina, thank you for the question. And yes, we have used it. As part of the transformational analytics worksheet, you'll see predictive analytics as part of the bottom part of the process for each stage, because it's built on a logic model. So you're looking at, you're looking at your actual input, process, output to outcome. And so as part of that process, predictive analytics are a part of each one of the stages that that you utilize in being able to perform your initiative. So you want to look at predictive analytics, and you have a forecasted ROI. One of the methodologies that we teach is how to forecast ROI. And so you will have forecasted ROI metrics and analytics, and also predictive analytics as part of that forecast that you would be able to chart and plan for in your work.
And I think we have probably time for one more question. Daryl has his hand up, and I know there's some more in the chat, and we can get back to you later with responses to those. And you will have access to the video recording afterwards, which will help.
Yeah. Okay. And I was going to mention, Teresa, if also I can get a copy of the chat log, I'd be happy to send some of the answers to the questions that they had that we didn't have time for. And so let's hear the next question.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Hubbard, it's Daryl Butler. I had the pleasure of sitting in your training about 22 years ago.
Oh, wow. Nice to hear from you again, Daryl.
Yeah, definitely. I was still in corporate America at the time. I came back all excited after my certification to a metrics-driven organization that got intimidated by the metrics I was trying to drive it with. So I want to throw that back out to you. And I think your last slide may be the answer. I think the mistake for me was I only sent myself. And I wanted you to respond to say to the folks who are getting excited right here, right now, today, and want to come in and hang out with you for a few days and get that certification, get that information. They run back to the organization. The organization is like mine, was like, yeah, we're not going to do all that.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And, those are the challenges that you face, because, again, one of the things you've got to be able to have and create is a measurement mindset. And, a lot of times the organizations are not ready for it. And oftentimes, sometimes the individuals are not ready for it, because it does take some work to go through the process. But you can get fast and bad anytime you want. It really is about, doing those things that are important and done in a methodical way, so that you will have an audit trail back to exactly how you produce the results. And so what you can do is, there are shortcuts to the process. There are some things that you can do where you don't have to do a full 7-level analysis. Maybe one of the things that you say is, for our ERG and BRG initiatives, for 100% of the time, we'll always do levels 1 through 3. And so you'll do your needs analysis at level 0. You would then at level 1, look at reaction, satisfaction, and planned actions. Level 2, you look at training. And level 3, you would look at, did people go back and apply it? So if you focus on just those top 3 levels and say, for most of our initiatives, we'll at least do these 3 things, or 4 things, with the needs analysis as the starting point, then essentially it can streamline the process, and it can also help you to get momentum, so that then, because you don't do ROI for everything, because it's not necessary. What you have to do is ROI for those things that are of strategic value. And so you want to look at ROI for those things, then that's going to be less than 5% of what you do in your initiatives. The rest of the time, you're going to be working in 1 through 3 and 4. those are the kinds of things that you'll be focused on. So that should help streamline the process, help you to get accountability, and also get commitment from the individuals that you're working with.
Thanks. I want to remind everybody about the next sessions while I've got you here. So we do have a 45-minute break, and then at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, we have 2 concurrent sessions you can choose from. One is really geared towards people who are starting newer ERGs, or if you're looking at revamping and kind of revitalizing your ERG. And the other one is for more established organizations. And then we have, after that, one more set of sessions. There's 3 concurrent, and one is the peer coaching with your similar ERG types. And in this session, you're going to focus on helping your peers solve a problem that they have. We have one for agencies, and then there's one for the people who are leading all the ERGs. So we've got 45 minutes for a break, get something to eat, some coffee, get caught up, but make sure you come back. And Ed, thank you so much for an incredibly informative session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you in the next sessions.
All right. Thank you. And have a great session, everyone. Thank you for the coming to this conference. You're going to learn a lot.
Yep. And you'll see the recording. And we also have an upload of some documents that Ed made available to everybody. Thanks so much.